Hi, everybody. This is Matt Trzlecki, Email Delivery Manager on Amazon SES. We're here to talk about improving message deliverability to ensure customer reach. This was a previous session at 2019 reInvent. We got a lot of positive feedback about it, so we wanted to expand our audience and share this webinar with you. Today, we're going to discuss email deliverability, just the general principles and practices, best practices from a sending standpoint. We're going to talk about the ISP's role in email deliverability and the relationship between senders and receivers. We're going to talk about the Amazon Simple Email Service, deliverability and tools and expertise that help promote the service and help deliver messages endpoint to endpoint, and then also to the inbox for our users. And then we had a question and answer section, and we can go over a couple of the common questions that we received, but overall, that'll be our presentation for today. Moving with the email deliverability overview, there's the basics of an email transaction are that it really is an SMTP transaction from one sender to a recipient via mail transfer agents. They connect via an SMTP transmission. Their emails can be accepted or rejected or deferred or throttled, and those statuses are represented by the SMTP codes. So you can see some that would be accepted would be a 250 code. It would typically have additional information like it was accepted or it was passed through. But if you had any type of deliverability problem, let's say a bounce, it would probably be a 500 error code or a 400 error code. The 500 error codes typically refer to a permanent bounce, a permanent issue. So that could be that the user doesn't exist there, or that there could even be a block. So it's really important to understand the SMTP messages that you're getting when you send messages to your recipient domains. When you get a 400 level message, it can mean a lot of different things. It can mean that the site wasn't available, the domain wasn't available, there's no MX record available with that domain. It's a transient error, which means that it's a temporary issue for a temporary reason. We didn't get a confirmation that they were willing to accept, and we didn't get a confirmation that they were willing to reject. So it's one of those messages that you have to look a little deeper into to figure out what's actually going on. So it's really important to understand the SMTP transaction and the responses that go along with it anytime you're having a deliverability issue, because most likely the answer will be in that response. With all the email that we send and all the email that anybody sends, and we'll use Amazon SES, you have to have some level of confidence that the email is coming from that source. And so there are two main security and authentication policies out there. First one is SPF, the Sender Policy Framework. And basically that's just a record, a DNS record that identifies sources that you are permitting to send email purported to be from you. So from the Amazon SES side, if it's coming from any of these IPs, we've allowed that to happen and said, if it comes from these IPs, accept it as Amazon SES messages. And so the minus all at the end basically says that if it's not from one of these sources, reject the message outright because it's not from us. And so that's one of the authentication methods used. The second one is DKIM, which is Domain Key Identified Mail. It is more of a key pairing. So you put a public key in your DNS, and then you sign every message with a unique DKIM signature that pairs with your public key pairing. And once the lookup is done on the DNS side, they can match the keys. And if they match, the DKIM passes. If not, you can again tell it how to treat the messages. And so those are the two primary pieces of authentication. And then there's a third reporting piece, which is DMAR, which is basically just the reporting of how messages are trying to be sent from either your domain or your resources. And they're good to have DMAR in place so you understand, maybe if there's somebody trying to spoof your messages, trying to use your name or your brand, and purporting to be you, you'll get that information back on the DKIM signature. So those are the primary two authentication methods, and then the alignment is the DMARC, which you can use as an additional security method. There are best practices from the ISP standpoints, just from general deliverability, just from email sending, and it depends on what field you're in, but the basic concept is send people that have explicitly requested your email. And that's conceptually straightforward and very easy from a high level, but it can be very difficult to actually implement. So you have to look at who your users are, or who the recipients are, and who you're trying to target and what you're targeting them with, and then understanding what those recipient domains or mail service providers or ISPs are expecting from senders, especially large volume senders. Each ISP has a specific guideline as to what they expect, whether that's a throughput guideline, how fast you can send messages, how many concurrent connections you can have, how many messages per connection, the type of messages that they want you to send, how they want you to ramp up. So all these things are typically defined for the larger ISPs on their postmaster pages. And a lot of them are common across most ISPs, but a lot of them, but there are some that are specific to certain ISPs. So it's really good to understand your list and to focus on the ISPs that you work with if you're having any deliverability problems, because then you can focus on what they expect and their best practices and conform your sending to that. All this contributes to something called sender reputation. It's like anything else with a reputation label. It's how people view you based on what you've done in the past as a sender. And there are a few areas of sender reputation that can be established. IP reputation and domain reputation are the primary ones, and they're pivotal for most ISPs, especially the large ISPs. Some ISPs like Gmail and Hotmail will actually show you IP reputation to some scale. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the exact always how that ISP is going to view you, but it gives you a good snapshot on certain days of how your IP and your sender reputation is performing. So it's always good to also reach out and develop and use any tool sets that are available from a reputation standpoint. So that's Gmail or Google Postmaster tools for Gmail and SNDS for Hotmail. And there's other tools out there, but those are the two that come to mind specifically. But the important part is that we have to understand who you're sending it to, what they expect, and then fall in line with that expectation. And across all ISPs and most recipient mail servers, there's deliverability best practices, and those factors are not including things like bounces and complaints. We're talking about things that influence inbox placement delivery beyond just bounces and complaints. And they do have a major impact in deliverability and also your reputation, but things that some marketers don't necessarily consider quite as much as those bounces and complaints would be things like content, what your list is trying to target. Is it a list that you procured, or is it a list that you organically built? Obviously, if it's an organic list, it's better. You know that you have opt-ins for explicitly what you're trying to either sell or service, or however you're trying to interact with your customers. And then things like scheduling. Are you sending emails every day? Are you sending them at the same time each day? Or is there some sort of expectation that you're going to start to set with ISPs that say, we send a newsletter out every morning at 8 a.m. And so ISPs would start to recognize that. And as long as the feedback on those pieces are good, they'll start to consider that timing. So scheduling, cadence, the amount of emails you send per day, per recipient. Are you sending a recipient 5 to 10 messages a day for a retail product? That might be too much, and it might cause complaints, but it also might cause the ISP to go, you're sending the same thing to the user so many times. The user hasn't responded to any of them. We're going to start blocking or spam folder placing some of these messages. So the content list, scheduling, cadence, the type of messages sent, whether it be a promotional message or a marketing message or a transactional message, each of those categories has a little bit of a different set of rules to follow. And actually, transactional and promotional marketing messages have two completely different foundations as far as what's expected from a CAN-SPAM perspective. So things like physical address and unsubscribe might not be necessary on transactional messages because you've already interacted with that user, but on a promotional or marketing message, it would be. So understanding what type of message you're sending and conforming to the rules for those messages are really important. And then ultimately your sender reputation, which we've discussed a little bit, it's going to be the main driver of performance in terms of inbox deliverability versus spam folder deliverability versus potentially not making it to the recipient ISP or domain at all. So looking at all those best practices and conforming them to the ISPs that you're sending to is a really, really smart method in terms of targeting your audience and targeting better deliverability specific to the ISPs that you know are a part of your list. But it's also good just to understand deliverability best practices that are shared across many ISPs. And we talked about the types of traffic. So you have marketing traffic and you have transactional traffic. And marketing traffic, there's obvious reasons why companies send marketing traffic. They want to promote a product or service. They want to induce an action from the user. They want them to click through either to the web page, to a form, to some level of obtaining some customer relationship with them. Now, sometimes that's before an actual transaction with the customer. So it could be that the customer is not really somebody who had purchased or engaged in a service before that you're trying to reach out to based on some sort of sign up. But the problem with that is, since there is no real formal relationship already, you have to then follow the specifics of the country laws that you're in. So if there are, for instance, if you're in the U.S., you have to abide by the CAN-SPAM laws, and within those laws, you'll see that there's different expectations for marketing and transactional messages. CASL, there's separations of pieces for the amount of instances that you can hit, and the penalties for each instance can be pretty severe. So you have to understand the laws of the spam laws within the country that you're either sending mail from or sending mail to. GDRP. Very tight with the data privacy and protection. So if you're sending to any European nations, you have to understand GDPR and the data privacy that goes along with that. And so these marketing messages are they can be a little riskier because they typically will have lower engagement than a transactional message. They'll typically have a higher spam rate because some people will mark it as spam, whether they signed up for it or not. It could be that they're receiving too many, or there's a lot of reasons why somebody would mark it as spam or unsubscribe. But those rates then go into, in some part, your sender reputation. And so if you have high spam marks, and if you have high unsubscribe rates, the odds of your marketing traffic making it to the inbox decrease every time you see spikes in those metrics. So this is kind of that higher risk, higher reward traffic where you're actually trying to get them to get the customer to do something in action. But you have to make sure that you maintain the spam laws, or you're following the spam laws specific to that country for those marketing messages. Transactional messages are related to some sort of transaction of either goods or services between the sender recipient that has already been established. And transactional messages are just an indication or notice of that information. So it's typically higher engagement because it's things like password resets or receipts or tracking. So people are a lot more interested in that information because it's pertinent to something that they specifically requested. So because of that, the laws for transactional messages from a spam law perspective are a little looser. But that's because the relationship has already been established, and there should be an opt-in, and there doesn't need to necessarily be that implied relationship because there's already an explicit one. And with transactional messages too, it's good to separate these types of traffic because they're very important and they're very time sensitive. So a marketing message might be a marketing campaign for something, weeks from now, or that's not as time specific, but transactional message is typically something that a user is requesting or getting as a result of something that just happened, like a password reset, or a one-time password, or account confirmation, or even a receipt. So those things need to get there in very timely manners, and so that's why it's important to understand your traffic, and it's really a good idea to split the traffic when you can in terms of IP reputation, domain reputation. Mixing the two could adversely impact your transactional channel. So it's a good idea to split the two. Now we're going to talk about the ISP's role in email deliverability. The email service, the internet service providers and mailbox providers are our customers. They're the folks that we're targeting, and our customers are targeting as email service providers. So we have to understand that we're asking them to accept messages from us to their customers and their users, and their most important goal is to protect their users. So they want to keep unwanted messages out of the user's inbox. Frankly, they don't even want to pass them to their spam folder. They want to protect their users as much as possible, but they don't want to incorrectly mark something as a false positive to an extent where users are missing significant portions of messages. And they really do want to deliver the messages the users do want. Those are the primary goals when it comes to email deliverability from the ISP's perspective, from an email service provider. Right? They want to protect them from bad messages, but they definitely want to make sure that the messages that the recipient wants and has requested go to their inbox as expected. ISPs, they have no formal agreement with any senders. There's no SLA or any type of an agreement where they have to provide a service, or they have to provide inboxing, or they even have to provide data. So you have to understand what the ISPs expect and follow their guidelines. And you can build relationships with ISPs through their support channels, through various conferences and events where ISPs are present. But that's not to say that you can get a good relationship with an ISP and then just pass through whatever you want. There's still going to be some level of expectations to use the ISP's best practices and implement those when mailing to their users. So it's good to have a good relationship with the ISPs, especially from an email service provider standpoint, but it doesn't guarantee anything because they have no formal obligation to any sender. Their obligation is to their users, and we have to remember that when we're sending to them. So that's how the email service providers and internet service providers interact, is that we really try to adhere to what the ISPs are expecting, and we guide our customers in a way that also uses those best practices. But if they don't, we don't have any recourse to say, oh, we have an SLA, Gmail has to hit it. But that's not the case. ISPs don't have those obligations to us. So it's best to abide by their best practices and then try to develop relationships via their postmaster channels. Amazon Simple Email Service is our email service provider service from AWS. It's a cloud-based service that helps users and businesses develop emails for all types of campaigns, whether that be transactional, marketing, whether it be drip campaigns, triggers. There's a lot of robust functionality within SES and Pinpoint in order to send emails and help target and develop your e-marketing channel. We have a few different setups in terms of the IP usage. We have shared IPs and we have dedicated IPs. Just to quickly go over what those are, shared IPs are IPs with a shared sender reputation across many senders. So it could be an IP pool of, let's say, 20 IPs with 50 customers on it. And those customers are not related in any way, or maybe they are. But they're 50 independent customers sharing IP space, thus sharing responsibility for maintaining reputation on the IPs. And so they all have some influence on IP reputation. Now, this can be a good model for some companies because they might not have a consistent sending schedule. They might have spikes in their volume. They might have big holiday or promotional days where they need to send a lot more than they normally would, or they might just have low volume altogether. So they don't have the email volume to be able to maintain good sender reputation at all times on a single or multiple dedicated IP pool. So in those cases, shared IPs are a good solution for that. But the good and the bad with the shared IP is everything is shared. So if somebody does something great, or if the shared pool is really doing well, everybody is abiding by ISP best practices, everybody's using opt-in list, then the sender reputation of that pool is going to be great and everybody's going to benefit from that. But if a couple senders, or even really one egregious sender, does something really bad, like buys a list and sends it out and hits spam traps, then there's going to be a problem, and everybody in the pool could potentially be affected, depending on who you're sending to. So those are some of the positives and negatives of a shared IP pool. Ideally, a sender would want to be in a dedicated IP pool because they want to have complete control over their sender reputation, both from a domain sender reputation standpoint and the IP reputation standpoint. And so when you are on dedicated IPs, everything that you send is attributed to you only. Now, this means that you have to have good sending schedules. You have to have consistent sending. The cadence needs to be consistent. You need to know that your users are opt-in, and you need to be able to keep your complaints low, bounces low, and engagement, fair to high. And that is a model that'll keep a dedicated environment up and running for a good while without having the outside influence of maybe another shared sender in that space influencing your sending. So it's very good to, most companies would want to be on their own IP space because of that, because they want complete control. And so, and it's also a good way to separate your marketing and promotional traffic as well. So if you have two IP pools, one for marketing, one for promotional, you can ensure that your transactional channel isn't influenced by the marketing channel, and you get good, quick, timely deliverability for that channel. And it's never influenced by anything that the marketing side is doing. In the same, though, as shared, you get no benefit of another good sender in that shared space because you're on a dedicated environment. But typically, good sender would not need to leverage any other sender's reputation because if you build and manage your reputation even over as short as 7 days to 14 days, like you're getting some level of sender reputation attributed to you, and so if it's good, you should continue to see a positive, and if you're following the ISP's best practice, you should continue to see a positive trend in that regard. And as you ramp up, you'll continue to see more and more engagement as long as you're sending to engaged users. Now, along with just our SES and Pinpoint products and services, we also have features that help monitor your deliverability, help you understand where you are from a IP and domain reputation standpoint. And we can even do things like predictive inbox placement tests with some of our tools. And this all helps to get you in a good place to send and know what you're sending and have expected results, and not just send and hope that you do well from an inbox standpoint. So being able to use the deliverability dashboard, you can see certain ISPs, how you're doing as far as inbox placement versus spam folder placement, and it can give you a good idea of whether you can lean a little heavier on one ISP if you have a larger list and you're trying to separate some of that, or if you need to focus on another ISP and focus on their best practices to help improve inbox placement there. We also have domain and IP blacklist reputation monitoring. So if your IP, especially if you're in a dedicated space, if your IP is on any type of blacklist or any major blacklist, the monitor will tell you that, and we can also go through removing that listing and help support that. You can also do predictive testing by using our inbox simulator, our mailbox simulator. and you can see if it does go into the inbox, and if it does place well. And if it doesn't, you can look at maybe the header and some of the scoring that goes along with it, and maybe develop a little bit better, whether that be content or links or domains or whatever it might be. It'll help you find out those problems before you send your actual campaign. So I just talked about a little bit about this. This is where, with the deliverability dashboard, you can really get in and look at how am I doing with Gmail or Hotmail. And this is aggregate data. It's not specific, 100%. This is how your campaigns are doing. You can look at that through your campaign results, but this is more of an aggregate of here's how you're performing based on the data points that we have available. And so you can see that in this particular example, if you had a large volume of Gmail subscribers and you're only getting 68%, you might want to focus on some of the ISP best practices that Gmail suggests. Now, in the same, if you have a low Gmail volume on your list and you have high Yahoo volume, you might not be as concerned because the Yahoo's at 90.1% inbox placement. And if that's your target and focus audience, then you're doing pretty well there, and you want to continue to do that with them. So those are types of ways you can look at and leverage the domain reputation. What's cool about it too is you can also look at it at a per campaign level. And so you can look at, hey, did your domain reputation drop, and was it because of this particular campaign? And so you can see the factors that would contribute to some of those domain reputation results. So if the spam folder is spam percentage is 5%, that's really high. You have a spam problem because the inbox placement looks pretty good at about 92%. You're getting a 3% read rate. That's not really that good. That means only 3% of your people are actually engaging with your messages. It's an indicator to ISPs that perhaps the list that you're sending to, or the content that you're sending to that list, is unwanted. So the read rate and the open click rate are indicators of that. And so you can see that it's pretty low read rate on here. It would probably contribute, if this was common, to a lowered domain reputation. And then with IP and domain blacklist monitoring, anytime your IPs go on a major blacklist that could influence deliverability, like a spam house or CloudMark, you can see them here. You might not actually be able to see the CloudMark listing, but spam house or any publicly available listings, you'll be able to see here. And by being able to detect them quickly, you can take action quickly, and you won't be sending mail to that's either going to get bounced or might go to the spam folder right out of the gate. So it's always good to manage and maintain your IP and understand if there's any blacklistings and how to mitigate them. And then with our predictive inbox placement test, you can perform specific tests and see how major providers are treating them as far as inbox placement, spam folder placement. If they're outright rejecting them, you'll get some level of indication of how it's being received. And we have about 95 major email providers that we have as part of this predictive placement testing. We also have Deliverability Consultation. We have a full deliverability team on the SES side. We also work with a lot of pre-qualified deliverability experts and partners, such as eDataSource, 250OK, Kensico. So if you ever have any deliverability concerns or need any type of deliverability consultation, we certainly have a full team available. And this was the part where we took some questions and answers, and some of the common questions were related to things like, do you need to have both authentication methods in place? And the answer would be yes. And then, do you need to have DMARC? You don't necessarily need to have DMARC, but it's really good to have those reports available to understand if you are being spoofed across the net, or somebody is trying to use your domain or brand in an abusive way, because a lot of that authentication is to help protect your brand and prevent spoofing. We also had questions as it related to, do ISPs work with specific ESPs? And ISPs do a great job at understanding their user base and understanding that emails are coming from a lot of different providers, from a lot of different companies, and that a lot of them are wanted messages. Their difficult job of trying to filter out the unwanted messages is very difficult. They see billions, if not trillions, of email a day. So, my answer to that was that it is good, and most ESPs do have an established relationship with most ISPs, but it's not something, like I said in a previous slide, that we have a formal agreement with. They don't have any formal agreement with any ESPs and ISPs, so it's best just to keep a good relationship with them, work through their normal mitigation channels when you can, through the postmaster forms. Don't look for so-and-so's email and send an email to that person saying so-and-so sent me your email. That's not a good way to get on Postmaster's good side. So follow the normal channels, develop those relationships in an organic way. We also had questions about list building and, even things like acquisition. And, one of the questions was, can we purchase a list that we know the source of is a good source? And I would always say that no. Acquisition of lists is always a bad idea because you don't know under what conditions that those members were acquired. And so, if they were acquired using some sort of promotion and that promotion's over and now you're sending them messages from an unrelated product or service, or even if it is related and they don't recognize it as something that they opted in for, you garner a good chance to get some spam complaints and some unsubscribes and potentially even hitting spam traps. So it's harder to build a list organically. And if it was okay to buy them, most companies probably would. But your list is one of the most important pieces of your email marketing channel. And protecting your list and building a good list is probably one of the most important things you can do for email channel. And by acquiring a list in any way, you are really taking some risk. So we always recommend that you don't acquire a list in any way and you build your own organic lists. We had a couple other questions related to how some of the consultations would be viewed or how to engage with them. And you can reach out to us via our support team, or if you are already an AWS account, or you already have an AWS account and an SES account, you can certainly reach out to us and to the support team to ask any of those questions, and we can look into those specifically. Other than that, I think that's pretty much it. Just want to thank you, everybody, for your time. And if you have any additional questions, please let us know